Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about pay-to-win and payment systems in games. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the audience at home what we do on this podcast?
Well, it's pretty simple. We like to talk about games. And I guess before we get into the nitty-gritty, we should do our weekly updates that we do. I guess for D&D, what do we do this week? We played in Iron Gods. We played Rune Lords. So in Rune Lords, I actually really like this session a lot. In Rune Lords, we got onto, like a riverboat or whatever, like a ferry. And we are en route to our next destination kind of out in the wilds. And I really, really enjoy these sessions of kind of like traveling. And I think that they're really important. I think that they're secretly really important. Into kind of like keeping the flow of the game and transitioning between like books and stuff properly. I don't know. How do you feel about? Do you have an opinion?
I don't know. They're very flavorful, and I can tell you because I'm running it that it's marked content, right? Like it's new content. In my game, we're just kind of like you take the ferry, and 2 weeks later you arrive in Turtleback Ferry. And my party was okay with that. I don't know. I do think they're interesting. I do think they're good for like these kind of interim adventures where we kind of flesh out some other things, right? Get to do some more unique little things. I don't know. Importance is a hard thing to gauge.
Yeah, that's fair, I suppose. I also think that there is a downside to it. I think sometimes, and this is a good thing, right? Like sometimes your players are really jonesing to kind of like hit the next objective, and I think this one has been good, and this one's good for Mark's game specifically because we've spent so long in Magnamar. We've been doing 10 of those sessions were just giant fights, right?
Yeah.
I'm not super 100% clear on what exactly happened story-wise because things were just kind of like so long and drawn out, and so I like that this is kind of like a collection moment of some low-key getting everybody together and kind of like back on
I definitely
pace, I suppose.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely didn't hate the tournament. It's just it was some. So for me personally, I think I missed like the kind of one of the introductory RP sessions, and like the tournament, just kind of the tournament. It felt kind of like, it felt kind of like just like a pure mechanics thing because that's what it was kind of meant to be. It was kind of meant to be a mechanics fun free for all. And I think if when Mark asked us how much we wanted to do it, if I could go back in time, I'd make it a little bit smaller than it was. Because I think it's good to get back to like properly motivated combat type of deal. Like it's good to be back to like, well, when things happen, it's because something's attacking you or something's happening rather than you're fighting for the sake of fighting, which is what most of the last bit was.
And I have to say I was pretty down on the tournament. When we voted, I voted no tournament whatsoever, kind of predictably, but. I did that kind of as a protest vote. I knew I was the last one to put a vote up, and I just I knew that everybody else voted for like the full tournament, so I was just kind of like, flailing against the wind, kind of thing. But I think that the tournament was, it was good. It was certainly big in terms of the city overall, and the story stuff that did happen that I did kind of like latch onto. Obviously, Kenzo is married now, right? And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for like this tournament or whatever. I do kind of feel like the number of fights was too many. It's like 10 or 11 fights. It's a lot of fights. Whereas it could have been, it could have been 5 or 6, but it also could have just been like 3 or like 4. I think 4 might have been like a great way to kind of do it, and maybe include some stuff with the other teams fighting. That said, I thought the mechanics of each fight were.
Oh yeah, the fights themselves were awesome.
Yeah,
it's just a little bit too much of a gauntlet, I guess, for my tastes. But yeah, like some of those fights, I would definitely love to see in like a more natural setting. Some or like where like in like a ruined temple or something. You know, that kind of thing.
Definitely. Well, now that we've just like spent the first 5 minutes shitting on Mark's game,
I want to emphasize that it wasn't like we're not trying to shit on it. Just
I really hope Mark is listening right now. Guest of friend of the show, Mark. Don't take that the wrong way.
Yeah. I think part of it too is, especially the end part of it was over the holidays. And like it happened this kind of stretch. It took a very long stretch of real world time.
That's true. I also think I think part of it is also the coupling of like a hardcore conspiracy plot with these fights. Because the conspiracy plot itself, if this was just a straightforward, I don't know, just some other plot that kind of like accompanied the tournament, I don't think it might have been as much trouble. But with like this really hardcore conspiracy plot where we're kind of like fumbling around in the dark and trying to put together like who knows what and doing and all of these things, I think that's the interruptions of the fights were really pairing those two things together was kind of like a disjoint almost.
Yeah, I can feel that.
But yeah, and then we had Iron Gods, and then in Iron Gods we fought
the Vortex Dragon.
Yeah.
The Slayers of Voss.
Braycrocs or something. Man, I really hate Pathfinder names. I think a lot of them are just really garbage.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. Part of it is that, like, for a lot of characters, like, who cares if the Vortex Dragon was named? We found out about it, and then within 15 minutes we were hitting it, and now it's dead. So
yeah, that's also true. And then I also now that I think about it, I actually do like a lot of like Hell's Rebels stuff. You know what's great about the Hell's Rebels names is that all of like these minor characters have great names, like Clenched Jaw and like Zacharin Vost. I just think these I don't know. The names of the minor NPCs are awesome. Vost,
but like Clenched Jaw, that seems a little bit on the nose to me. That's like naming your main villain something like Darth Sidious or something like that.
Do you think Clenched Jaw is the villain?
Oh no, I just think that it's an on the nose. It's a very evocative name.
Fair enough.
Like I bet you he's not, say, a frilly magician, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I get what you're saying. There is it's not very subtle.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they do it well. Like, he picked his name. He's called Clenched Jaw because he bit someone's arm off or something like that. And, sometimes that works. Sometimes...
Yeah, I'm also kind of surprised to see certain, I'm also surprised to see certain names like underserved. So the mercenary guy the warden that you found out about, Khosrani Hammerhelm isn't his name. I gave him that last name. He's just Khosrani in the book. He doesn't have a last name. I was just kind of like, well, this is weird. Like, come on.
Yeah. I don't know. But anyway. But Iron Gods is pretty good.
We're really in the home stretch. It kind of snuck up on me. This dungeon has been gigantic.
This game has definitely given me some thoughts about high level play and how to kind of how to balance around that kind of thing. Because, like, in this fight in particular, the dragon had true sight, which means that my gimmick, which has been saving me since I got it, which is I permanently have displacement on me, didn't work, and all of a sudden I just started eating damage, and I was and not happy about it type of deal.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I just got Hell's Rebels books 5 and 6, and so we're into high level play as far as the books have gone, and it's been something that I've been thinking a lot about. Because high level play really does present a lot of problems, just kind of from like I don't know. It feels like it presents a ton of problems for the kind of social aspect, because your diplomacy checks are like 40. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's going to be kind of a big thing to deal with. Though at the same time, Another friend of the podcast who I haven't talked about in a long time, but an old friend of mine named Corey once, we had a discussion about super high level play, and he was like, I think super high level PCs are fine. They just kind of have to live in a world with super high level NPCs to kind of counteract them. So I think that's actually pretty insightful.
Yeah. If you remember his epic level game back at Hopkins, he did a fairly good job with that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm referencing. He and I were kind of talking about it afterwards or before, around it to a certain extent. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that's it for D&D stuff. What have your video gaming tastes been like?
Well, I just got back to my desktop, so I've been putting some time into Xenoblade Chronicles X again, since I haven't been able to play it for a month. And I still haven't really gotten that far into it. I'm still kind of in the intro stuff, but I'm liking it. It's kind of like it's the word I've heard it described. It's kind of like a single player MMO. And I'm interested to see if it can hold my attention for a while. Also been playing a lot of League. It was a thing I could play a lot when I was back in.
It's a pretty light game for like a laptop.
Yeah, it's light in terms of system requirements because they want everybody to run it, even people on their like Nokia N gauges and the like. But yeah, that's fun. I'm excited for the new patch. I'm excited for the new champion. Not sure how I feel about the Shen rework. Just because it seems I feel like I want to like toy with that before I feel about it type of deal.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I haven't played League in a while. It's been like a month since I've played League or whatever. But I agree with you about kind of the Shen rework and Jin and everything. They just got announced yesterday and today for us at the time of recording. And I'm a big believer in withholding judgment until you have numbers, because I really do think there's a lot of numbers kind of make or break a champion.
Oh, absolutely. I'm actually, I go a step further than that. I like to withhold judgment until I actually play the thing, because I feel like numbers tell a lot of the story, but it's hard to kind of feel that out until you actually get your hands on the champ.
Yeah, that's fair. I just mean in like a predictive sense, right?
Sure.
Like I don't like like when you get these champion reveals and then we put it in like a giant Facebook chat with all of our friends. Everyone inevitably got this. He looks broken, or like he looks like
I don't like stacking passives.
I know that 3-hit passives. God, the designers should be embarrassed, right? Like all of these kinds of things or whatever. And I kind of want to step back from that. I think the numbers are really important to kind of like make that gauge. But I think Jin looks great, not just because they're using a mechanic that you and I have talked about in the past that I think is a really neat idea for an AD carry, this kind of thing where he doesn't have attack speed, or he doesn't benefit from attack speed in the traditional sense. He always attacks at the same rate, but he gets AD from his attack speed and from his critical strike chance and everything. And I think that that's really awesome. And I think the unsung thing that I think is going to happen when he gets released, and this is unconfirmed, obviously, I haven't played the PBE or whatever, but I think the unsung thing about his release will be the kind of the cadence of it, because he's going to have a consistent attack speed I think it's going to feel good to be attacking at like your maximum rate, which is going to be like it's going to be rhythmic, which is like I really love these kinds of touches, right? It's going to be rhythmic, which like feeds into almost the fantasy of his like artist, his like crazy artist, super
almost,
obsessed musician,
hitting on quarter notes type of deal.
Exactly, I think that's gonna be. I think it's gonna be neat.
And I think from like a more mechanical perspective, it's also going to be cool because that's a champion that you can. Learning how to orb walk on him is not something you ever have to adjust, right? Like it's always the same. I think it'll be cool from that perspective.
Ooh, that is actually kind of interesting. I learned how to orb walk with Draven because he very obviously demands it of you. But I definitely agree with that. I think that's true. I also am up in the air about the Shen rework. I really don't like his dodge mechanic. It seems very weird to me.
I also don't like... So the thing that's got me worried the most is how to reposition that spirit sword it seems like the only reposition is on the Q. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's got like
yeah.
a tether or something, like if it's got like a max range or something. It just seems like it's it'll be interesting though, because it's a low cooldown ability and he's an energy champion, so he should theoretically be able to use it fairly frequently, and make that not an issue. But
yeah, I think the problem will be kind of how precise he can be with it.
Yeah.
Which I think is why this dodge thing is kind of as powerful on paper as it is, because it's obviously keyed to the sword, so it's hard to be precise with it.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I'm
on face. My initial thought would be is that what they're probably looking for is something like the trade-off between pulling the sword to you to get the extra damage and leaving it somewhere to protect your allies. And what might end up happening is kind of, well, he's Shen, so you just leave the sword at your allies and don't give a shit about damage and just use it for the dodge anyway.
Yeah, I kind of feel that. To be honest, I don't know. I feel awkward about it. But yeah, I mean, I haven't been playing League. I've substituted League with World of Warcraft for the most part. And Mass Effect 2, but I wanted to ambush you about something because I played another game this week.
Oh,
and it's a game that we've talked about recently. So just for context for the viewers, I guess last week one of our friends remembered that Mango judged the game Depression Quest to be all right. And you got very frustrated.
Well, I was mostly frustrated because of the person because he was insisting it was true. One, I do not like Depression Quest at all. And two, I was frustrated because in the way that this person is, he was insisting that it happened when it
right,
didn't.
and so you corrected him, and you said that you thought it was terrible, right? You provided textual evidence from, September of the year that it came out, whatever. September
not the year
of last
it came
year.
out. It was at the time,
or when it was huge. Whatever.
It was at the time that he claimed that I had shared my opinion with him.
And even today, I made like a passing reference to Depression Quest, and you said that game is terrible, and that game isn't even worth being free. Like they should pay people to play that game. What? Why? What? Why do you dislike Depression Quest so much?
The comment about having to pay people to play is mostly just like fluff and the kind of showmanship that gets involved in when speaking loudly in a crowded room. But I didn't like when I played it. I didn't find it compelling. I didn't find it interesting. And in a sense, the thing that aggravated me the most about it was the accolades it got for being what, in my view, was not a good game. I felt similarly about Gone Home. Gone Home, I think, is a much better game than Depression Quest, but I didn't think Gone Home was good. And not that it's a worse game for getting accolades for it, but it makes me more likely to feel strongly and more likely to comment on it that a game that I feel is not very good got critical acclaim.
Hey man, I'm a film buff, and we are entering into Oscar season, so I 100% kind of get that tension, right? That tension between, right, like, well, did it deserve Best Picture, right? Like, is Alejandro Inarritu really the best director kind of thing? Spoiler alert, he's not. Some derps talk about movies. Anyway, but I played Depression Quest. When that conversation happened, I was like, man, I should just play Depression Quest. So I just took, my lunch break that day, and I played through Depression Quest. And first of all, I was like, wow, I kind of can't believe Mango hates this so much. And second of all, I was like, wow, this is really good. I really, really, I don't like it in like it's not my favorite. I'm probably never going to go back to it or whatever, but I really, really, it was way better than I expected because that mechanic is so good. Oh, I was sitting there and I was just thinking about it for like an hour afterwards, and it was just like, this mechanic is so
Which
beautiful
mechanic
and elegant.
Are you talking about?
Specifically,
I haven't played the game what?
Yeah,
2
fair
years?
enough. So specifically, I really, the game is, for people who don't know, it's a big, written text kind of prompt. And then you get, a couple of dialogue choices, so to speak, on how you want to handle the situation that you've just been presented with, right? The top of your dialogue tree is favorable things, right, that are going to make you less depressed, and the bottom of it are things that are going to make you more depressed. And kind of the quote-unquote goal of the game is to get undepressed as much as you can, so to speak. But that's really it's not a goal-oriented game like that. There is no... Driving for a win state is kind of the inappropriate way to play the game. Like, it is really like a true role-playing experience in the sense that you are kind of getting the wrong experience if you just keep pressing that top answer or whatever. But anyway, the mechanic that I'm talking about is depending on your depression level, right? How depressed you are. Certain of those options on how you move forward are going to be stricken out with like red text or whatever. And I was just, and they could have just not included them, right? And they could have just given you fewer and fewer options kind of like underneath the hood in order to like drive this point home. But I think that the red strikeout is such a great metaphor, because it's not just that you can't do these things, it's that you see the right answer, right? You see the answer is to go to this party and have a good time, but you just can't do it, right? You are just paralyzed by it, and you can't click on that answer. And that feeds into almost like that weird self-loathing spiral of it that keeps sending you further and further kind of down. And that's not even like all of it, right? Because the other half of it is that, something I really enjoyed about it was sometimes you would have two answers back to back. One of them would be completely stricken out, like, hey, go to the party, have a good time. And the other one would be, well, you're really tired and you're not quite into it, but you feel like you've been neglecting your girlfriend lately, and so you want to go for her, right? And both of those answers end up in the same point, right? You both end up by going to the party or whatever, but the context of it is framed in such a way that I thought that was so great. I thought that was so great. And honestly, and this is kind of feeding into a bigger point that is something I've been thinking about, especially since playing Mass Effect 2, because I think Mass Effect 2 does this wonderfully. I really feel like there's kind of a... there's a wealth of really engaging mechanics, right? There's a wealth of, like, mechanics that you can really sink your teeth into and kind of wrap your head around. But I feel like something that games are lacking to a certain extent are mechanics that serve as a metaphor, serve as a metaphor for what's going on in the story. It's kind of the opposite of ludonarrative dissonance, like ludonarrative consonance, right? When like the mechanics in the story are both working towards the same goal and they're like interwoven really well. I think that's a great thing. It's a really awesome thing that we don't like quite celebrate enough. I don't know, in games.
That's fair. Now, so I'll let you know why I was not hit in such a positive way by these things is from moment like 1 or 2, like I never thought my choices mattered in that game. Like, it never fooled me into thinking that I could choose something better. Like, I was this may or may not be true because I never played the game a second time, but I felt that those red options would always be red no matter how I played the game, type of deal. Like, I didn't feel like I was actually accomplishing anything. Like,
Interesting.
Like, in the kind of way where, like, I get it. I kind of got the point of the game within, like, 30 seconds and was reading something that I didn't think was particularly well written at the time. Maybe, I like I said, I haven't read in a long time. And I was just like, I'm just reading a blog post that I have to click through, and I'm not getting anything. Like, it's like, because that illusion of choice has been shattered, I felt like I wasn't really doing anything. I didn't think that, like, the story behind it was enough to keep driving me forward to it.
I spent a little bit of time kind of exploring the possibility space because I think that's a bit of what, it's kind of what the game is asking of you to a certain extent. And so I did a little bit of that. But to be honest, I guess I didn't really get to a super clear answer. I just kind of assumed that it worked that way. But even if it doesn't, it kind of, is still it's still whatever because the point is made. But yeah, I definitely see what you're saying about like the blog post nature of it. It hit me really hard over the head at first, and then I just kind of fell into it in a weird way. I don't know, because it's not particularly well written, and it is really unsubtle. There's like. But that was kind of fine because like I felt as though the game needed the text to be super literal and super straightforward because all of the subtext was in that mechanic and in that kind of like this is what it feels like to be that frustrated, right, and to kind of spiral out of control. And eventually, I don't know. Eventually, I did kind of get into an okay spot with it too, because there were definitely times, like there's a time where you try and open up to your mom about it, but she's kind of like offhandedly dismissive about it, and it's great because the writing is so literal that like it is super straightforward, but you also feel I also got it right, like I got that emotional moment really clearly. I don't know about it. I was very surprised at your ridiculous disdain for this game.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, the vehemence is probably more of a reaction to our other friend claiming that I said it was all right.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it's it's like I said. Like Gone Home, which again I think is a much better game than Depression Quest, but I also think is ultimately a poor game. The story wasn't good enough for me, and I've got different problems with Gone Home, and I would encourage you to play that game at some point if you can.
I really do want to play that game. The problem I have with kind of all of these games is, in a way they feel. I mean, in a way they feel pretentious is like the most obvious statement of the decade. But I really like them. I really like these games because I like the focus on writing. I like the focus on story and everything like that. But I really hate this like oil and water kind of mindset that. And this happens in the AAA industry from the other perspective as well. I really hate this, League of Legends thing where there is, there is no story or whatever. It's just mechanics or whatever. I feel like the perfect game is something that marries great mechanics with great story, right? And it's not a content muncher. It's not like Half-Life or something where, there's a blend in there somewhere to be found, and it's just not necessarily...
Wait, I have to ask you, are you calling out Half-Life there?
Kind of. I don't think Half-Life 2 is all that great.
Oof.
I was just trying to think of... I literally was just trying to think of, the content muncher.
Those are some strong words. Oof.
What do you like about...
Oh, so this is not...
I don't mind exploring this tangent.
I don't think it's a tangent we can really explore because I got sick when I played the hoverboat scene in Half-Life 2, so I never finished that game, but it is a widely... it's widely accoladed game.
Yeah, I do not mind picking a fight with Half-Life 2.
That's I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, because so a content muncher, to kind of define terms is it has been defined in a couple of different ways, but it's a great metaphor for it is it's like reading a book where the pages are stuck together and you have to be really, what I mean? You just have to you spend all this time pulling them apart and then you get the thing. And a content muncher is describing, a lot of games could be content munchers, right? But it's really describing where you do gameplay section, and then are almost rewarded with the cutscene.
Right.
And I think that's really bad way to do. I think it's just bad. in general. And which isn't, by the way, anything against cutscenes or cinematics, right? I mean, Mass Effect 2, right?
I was going to say that sounds exactly like the Mass Effect games.
Well, so the
like
Mass Effect games, the Mass Effect games
story segments
are different because you also have control during the story segments. Like they're blended a lot better because even during the
say things,
right? Because you choose what to say, you choose how to react, kind of stuff, right? So it's blended. They're also better split up, if that makes sense, right? Like you'll enter into a short 1.5-minute cutscene in the middle of the mission to deal with, you know what I mean, to deal with some hostages that got left. And so, here's your cutscene, get a little bit of talking back and forth, whatever, choose what to do with the hostages, great, and then you move on. So it's not like Half-Life has these like 20-minute periods of just shooting dudes, right? And then you're rewarded with like 5 minutes of cutscene where you can go make a fucking sandwich. And I just thought that interaction is kind of fundamentally poor. Another good example of kind of like an anti-content muncher would be something like like BioShock, where you are in control of even during the quote unquote cutscenes, you're in control of the player. A lot of the storytelling is done quote unquote environmentally. By the way, and can I just say, environmental storytelling is not something unique or new to games. It's called mise en scène. It's existed in theater for millennia, literally. Like, we can chill out, games people. This is not our thing. But yeah, anyway, I don't really remember why I brought up Half-Life 2 in the first place at this point. Right. Because, sorry, just to finish that point. The oil and waterness of gameplay and story, that's not a thing. I don't believe that, right? I think that's what bad designers think, and that's what bad designers do. And that good designers do, like, the kind of telltale thing where, like, yeah, they're QTEs, but the telltale QTEs are really well designed because for a lot of them, those mechanics are like the metaphors that I'm talking about, right? Like you get to feel you get to kind of like feel the franticness with which Lee is slamming a ball peen hammer into a zombie's face way after it's been killed. You know what I mean? And I think that's important, and I think that's really like well done. And so these games like Gone Home, which are hyper mechanics light or whatever, being touted as super awesome is like it's like saying, I'm trying to think of a good like cross media example, but I don't really have one. It's squandering a huge opportunity because by being so mechanics light, they're missing out on the ability to inform the player with mechanics, right, as well as just with dialogue and story and all of that other stuff.
Yep. I feel like we could probably, again, spend, as is popular on this podcast, we spend the whole episode on proper mise en scène and proper like the gameplay, your oil and water point. But I think it's best that we move.
That's definitely, we've been here for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's best to move to some stuff about pay to win.
Man, we should really write these like alternate topics down, right?
Yeah.
Because whenever we're figuring out the top for it's always so haphazard.
Yeah.
And we've started all of these conversations that we've never finished. Anyway, pay to win, right? I'm with you. This was your topic. So what brought this about? So why is
So the reason that this came up is as I have mentioned on previous podcasts, I am very hype for this game called Black Desert that's supposed to come out this quarter. And one of the big things is it's a Korean MMO that's out in Korea, but they're bringing it to North America and Europe, and they're localizing it, including significant developmental changes, including it's free to play in Korea. It's going to be buy to play in America and Europe, and it's going to be a cash shop. But as of yet, they have said they've given some information about the cash shop, but not a ton. And so one of the big discussions that surrounds kind of all the threads talking about this is, is this game going to be pay to win? And then people arguing about what constitutes pay to win. Because there's like a lot of different views there. And also, we've also had these conversations recently about, say, mobile games and their pay to win status and whether or not, those games are pay to win or not. But I would just I kind of wanted to dig into like the advantages and disadvantages of these kinds of systems. Like the biggest one that struck me that had never occurred to me before is that one of a big issue is that when you have a cash system, a cash shop of any sort in an MMO, whether or not you can sell those cash bought items on the auction house is a big point of contention among people, because on the one hand you have people who want to be able to buy those items with in-game currency, and on the other hand, you have people who don't want that to happen because that means that you can affect, like, even though you're not paying directly for cash, you are at some level, you turning your dollars into coins, and that was kind of like the
interesting.
Kind of,
Wow. There's kind of a lot to get into here, but. First of all, as someone who works on... Well, actually, okay, I'll back that up for a second. Having played a lot of WoW recently, this has been I have played WoW for a long time, listeners. I played during vanilla. I played extensively during vanilla, and then I quit for Burning Crusade for stupid reasons, and then came back for Wrath of the Lich King, and that's when I played, like, the hardest core, and I've basically come, like, off and on ever since. I really enjoy WoW. I think it's a great game. It's it's kind of like one of those games that I always, like, kind of come back to, and then... exert myself and then leave kind of thing. But that was a big question a couple of years ago with WoW, because they have an in-game shop, right, where you could buy mounts or whatever. And for the first couple of them, all of those mounts were, they were soulbound. They were bind on pickup, right? And then all of a sudden, Blizzard released a mount that was bind on equip. So I could buy this $20 mount and then go put it on the auction house, right? And kind of in effect, right, I spent that $20, somebody on the auction house bought it for 10,000 gold, and I just spent $20 for 10,000 gold or whatever. I don't know. I mean, the Winged Guardian, which is what I'm referencing, it's a mount, It's just... there are easy mounts to get in the game. It's not like somebody is going to be hard pressed for the gold to buy a mount. Most players have dozens, unless you're like me and you have hundreds of mounts. So it's not like that's really winning, right? And I don't think that I guess I don't necessarily. I don't think the principle I feel like I'm proving is that just the ability to turn real world cash into in-game coins doesn't necessarily make pay to win, as far as I'm concerned. Because even though I could buy the best gear off of the auction house with it or whatever, it's so indirect. It's just so indirect that, like, it's really tough to parse that system.
I think there's other parts of it too that you're kind of like, this is because you haven't been following Black Desert at all, and
that's probably fair.
And I think that I understand your point, but I also think the realities of the WoW system are also a little bit different. In WoW, you can't buy the best gear off the auction house. It has to be won through raids and the like, right? You can't just flat out buy the best gear. At least the last time I played. Is that still true?
Well, to a certain extent. I mean, because it's a progressive thing, right? Like, you can't access that gear until you have I can't access mythic level raiding gear until I have heroic level raiding gear, until I have normal level raiding gear, kind of thing. So hypothetically speaking, I could go on the auction house, spend 100,000 gold to get the best crafted items I could possibly buy, in order to, like, jump over some of those hurdles, right?
Sure, and that shortcuts you to a certain point. It's not how you get the best stuff in the game, which I think is actually, in my mind at least, a very important piece in this determination. Like, I personally, I don't mind things like, say, XP boosts so much, so long as they in WoW you can buy you can level up your character to max level for, what is it, $60?
Yeah, it's $60.
And I don't mind that so much, because it's not like you can make your character you can't pay to win, but you can pay to
pay to skip. I think is what we're addressing.
Yeah. The difference here is that in Black Desert you can buy the best stuff off the auction house. And the other thing is that there is no direct player-to-player trading system at the moment. I think it's kind of, at least to my eye, it's kind of a mystery as to whether or not this is an intentional decision to keep gold farmers from existing. I think also part of this is that the economy of most MMOs is just blown the fuck out. It's the games, any game that's popular enough, the gold values are just like, you can't have a real running economy because it's done. There's somebody that's farming somewhere and has like near infinite gold, and the supply demand doesn't work out well. But
I don't know that I agree with that, to be honest. I think WoW's economy is great. I definitely have seen MMOs with really garbage economies. In fact, wow, now that I actually kind of like put this into my own terms, I think WoW is the only one that has a good economy. But WoW has always had a good economy.
I don't think WoW has a good economy. I think WoW has a very stable economy. I don't think it's a. When I say, so to kind of explain what I mean by a good economy, I mean, you can't if you go and sell something on the auction house in like a mildly populated server, everything's kind of like the set price that you see on like Wowhead or whatever the current auction house averaging site is, and that's not I don't like that because it's not like a living, breathing economy to me. That's kind of like gold kind of hovered at this standard of like X gold equals Y ores, and everything's kind of measured in terms of that.
This is sort of anecdotal, but it's actually really not. It's just kind of my experience has been different. I've made money on the auction house, so I actually really like playing the auction house. It's really it's super interesting to me. But I've definitely done that. Like I had, in order to buy my, what was at the time like the most expensive mount, like the most prestigious like mount thing that you could get in the game, I literally cornered the market on something on just like one of the random ore types or whatever, where I would log on like every couple of hours, and I would post my auctions at a fixed price, and anybody that undercut me, I would just buy them out, right? Because I was just doing it so much and so frequently that the rate of return, I was constantly buying all of the ore that was undercutting me. And I was selling enough ore at my price to kind of make up the difference, so to speak, to a point where I wasn't even farming the ore anymore. I was just fulfilling that trade. And I did that for like 2 weeks straight, until I bought this mount, and then I promptly quit. I bought the mount, I sold the rest of my ore, and then I quit the game for 3 months. But yeah, I don't know. That's something that you have to do, that you can't do in WoW. I've done it. I did it in Warlords with Savage Bloods. A lot of people in Warlords do it with, kind of various things. I don't know.
That's not been my experience. And also, that seems.
I think you have to have a lot of gold to like access that to a certain extent. I had to have the capital to corner the market, right? But I definitely did.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I get that, but I think that's maybe what I'm getting at, right? Like, everything just exists in such high volumes that, especially on a more populated server, right? Like I know that when we have played together, we've played on relatively low population servers where things are a little bit more flexible. But I just in almost every case I found that like there is somebody doing what you're describing, like setting up like essentially monopolies on the goods, and that's kind of like, if you have enough money to play that game, I guess, but it's not really part of the core system because it's at such a high level of like gold percentage. And I think that something they're trying to do with Black Desert, on the other hand, is trying to keep things more reasonable and keep materials more rare and whatnot by not kind of allowing you to fill. Essentially, it's hard to kind of get a ton of extra stuff into the game, as far as I understand. Obviously, I've never played, or not obviously, I did not go and get the Russian or Japanese or Korean version of the game and patch it with the English stuff. But I think that's part of why, to bring it back, that people are concerned about putting things on the auction house being able to kind of circumvent that kind of protection that the game has.
Yeah, I feel that because honestly, that reads a lot like the problems with Diablo 3 to me. I don't know. I don't know anything specific about the game, but just what you're describing sounds a hell of a lot like the initial release of Diablo 3, where stuff was I don't know, kind of so rare as to be not worth the time in a certain sense, and that is that's a real problem. I think we can all say that Diablo 3's real money auction house distinctively failed.
Yeah. I think part of that too is that it's also different objectives, right? Like I think Diablo's real money auction house, which I think in many ways was a pay to win system. Like there was a point at which you couldn't, even if you were just paying with gold and farming out gold, you couldn't advance without past like a money wall. The part of the failure there was that loot is kind of the main thrust of that game, and I don't think that's true in Black Desert. I don't think that's true in a lot of MMOs. There are other things you can do for fun without necessarily having the best skeleton whacker. But I think that's all that Diablo games are by design. They are loot whoring adventures, which is fine if for what they are. But I think they get hit particularly hard by these kinds of systems that allow you to introduce real money into the equation somewhere.
I feel that, but I also think I don't think pay to skip is necessarily bad. I think it's this is what I think is so bad about the ironically about like 4 or 5 hours ago, Total Biscuit, who I don't particularly like, but I keep track of kind of his thoughts because I think he's a pretty good aggregate for kind of like the gamer. But we should have like on like alternate topics, we should have like a content creators thing where we kind of talk about this stuff. Anyway, he put out a video that was like the most clickbaity title I've ever heard. 5 words I'd like to see retired from game discussion. And the very first one, which he talked for like 20 minutes about, is pay to win. And he's a big definition stickler, and I think a lot of people that use pay to win are kind of taking advantage of the fact that the definition of pay to win has really kind of slipped downhill by its nature, because pay to skip stuff like we're talking about can be pay to win, right? This is what the most mobile game, this is what a lot of iOS games are, right? They are presenting you with, like Clash of Clans or whatever. They're presenting you with these time-based mechanics, these energy-based mechanics that are quite literally pitting your patience versus, your patience versus your money, right? Like, are you patient enough to hold out, so to speak?
And I think more sinister than that, it's not only are you patient enough, but are you willing to fall behind somebody else who is willing to pay money? Type of that's the other pushing factor. Something like Clash of Clans or Farmville. If Betty Sue down the street pays $14 for a purple cow, are you really willing to sit there and let your farm fall behind hers because you weren't willing to shell out cash?
Clash of Clans, I agree with that in the context of it is a multiplayer game where you are fighting like other players' garrisons or whatever they're called. I played Clash of Clans for a while, but not all that much. But I actually don't really think that's true in something like Candy Crush, right? I think that the kind of the community and that competition that you're getting at is kind of like extra.
Sure, yeah.
It's not a part of the core experience necessarily.
For Candy Crush, it's definitely not there. Candy Crush, it's like, are you willing to wait to do your time waster?
Right, it's exactly what I mean, right? Like, are you willing to be patient enough for your time waster to refill your tries, or are you just going to buy it? And so I think that's what this is where pay to skip gets very sinister, right?
Yeah.
But then I put it up against games like League, where technically speaking, we're talking about the exact same thing, right? Like if I buy a champion with RP, I'm paying to skip that grind. To get all of the IP to get the game. But I think that the rate at which it's it's done is entirely fair in League and doesn't qualify League to be a pay-to-win system whatsoever. I've heard a lot of arguments. I've seen people talk about it. I see people get bent out of shape about it, obviously, but I just fundamentally don't agree. I don't think League is pay-to-win. Same thing with Hearthstone to a certain extent. People get really up in arms about Hearthstone and how you kind of have to pay to win in order to play that game, and I empathize. I see where they're coming from in like kind of an emotional context, but I think kind of rationally, I just don't agree. I don't think Hearthstone is pay to win either.
I think that something you're touching upon that I think can really be explored is that I think there's a big difference between pay to win and pay to skip, but I think you can also have very bad pay to skip systems as well.
Right, that's what I mean.
But even in kind of like I don't think the WoW $60 character upgrade is bad. I think that's an okay pay to skip. And thinking about it, I think that's because the leveling process is not a bad process. They have some really good, 1 to 60 content. The middle levels, the levels between that and cap, being of varying quality because of their age or whatever. But and even the later stuff is pretty good. Like those quests are not bad, but I think if instead say WoW just had like an open plane that you had to grind boars, to hit level 60, I think that skip would that pay to skip would definitely be terrible. It's saying, are you willing to kind of like throw your body against a mindless rock for 60 hours, or do you want to pay to skip it?
Right, that's kind of what I mean. I think those bad pay to skip systems are straight up pay to win bad. Right, they are pay to win, as far as I'm concerned, and this is why the definition has slid so far, right? Because all of a sudden we're introducing a scale into it, right, where certain pay to skip is good, certain pay to skip is bad. It all depends on the context, right?
Yeah.
But you're boiling it down to just one 3-word phrase that is generally speaking used to just shut down conversations about certain games,
right.
Because pay to win is some kind of like ridiculous sin. I've in our DLC episode we talked about this. I explained the pay to win quote unquote system of Dragon Age 2 and how I thought that was entirely appropriate in the context of the game. It literally does this cardinal sin that we're talking about, right? I paid real money to get the very best items and equipment. To get, not to fill out my party, obviously, but to get the best items and equipment for my party, right? That is on paper, right? Like according to Reddit or whatever kind of hive mind we're attacking, that is bad. That is pay to win. That is bad or whatever. But in the context of Dragon Age 2, it's great. It's fine. It allows me to skip all of this ridiculous inventory management, which I don't think is built to frustrate the player, right? Like, I don't think that's like its job or anything, on subsequent playthroughs, so that when I'm playing Dragon Age 2 for the third or fourth time, I'm not sitting here like, contemplating whether or not this red steel broadsword is going to be an upgrade. I can just not worry about it. And I think that's, I don't know, I think like, this is why it gets really hazy, right? It's really tough.
I think part of the Dragon Age thing there as well is that it's a single player game, and so ultimately, if you're going to pay to win, that's kind of your prerogative, right? It's the same thing as kind of as cheating with like a hex editor. With a single player game, I think this kind of thing kind of falls out entirely.
Yeah, I'm just saying, right, that it's hard to assign a rigid definition to this thing, and the looseness of its definition is the source of this kind of
controversy.
I mean, it is controversy, but it's stupid controversy, right? I think. I mean, I'm sure we'll have an in-depth discussion of Gamergate, but I will take a Gamergate controversy over people using shitty definitions to try and attack people, who like a game too much any day. Like,
yeah, I think that, I think you're right. I think the problem is that, there is like these are legitimate concerns, and then they're of different concerns to different people at different levels, right? And like. So if I wanted to know if a game has this problem, the easiest way to ask that question is this game pay to win, right? And obviously you want like something more than a yes or a no. You want like a nuanced, like paragraph long answer about why this could be one way or could be another, and you can decide that for yourself. But I think that this kind of like and, you know, and kind of we talked about last week, you know, this kind of like defensiveness that people are. It's like because it's got such a negative connotation, right? If you know, if I go to my favorite game and I see that someone has said, "Oh," someone's like, "Is this game payment?" He's like, "Oh yeah, you can, you know, do this." He's like, "No, no, this thing that I like, someone has impugned it. I must ride to its defense once more." And you know, you put up like, you know, this big front of like, no, it's not pay to win because you are not paying to win. You are paying to something, you know, like just that kind of thing, right? Where like you're right. The term is so demonized that you know, it's at some level any game is really, or not any game, but like any buy to play game is pay to win because you can't win the game if you can't play it, I guess. Type of deal.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, this kind of gets into the problems with free to play, kind of in general. I like free to play. I think kind of having nuanced and differing business kind of aspects to how you're going to monetize your game is neat. You know, I think it's good, and it allows for things. What I really like about it, I used to not like it, but eventually it was explained to me, or I just like read in the right post somewhere, how a free to play game isn't, you know, it's not really free to play, right? What it really is it's like set your own amount of money. I have poured hundreds of dollars into League at this point, right? But I really like that game, and I think it's great, and I want to support Riot, so I don't mind buying skins for my favorite champions, right? Like, and I like that. I like that interaction where I can kind of choose how much this game is worth to me to a certain extent, and I really like that about free to play. But you know, I don't think you know, people who talk about like, oh, free to play is the future of video games, like that. That is a frightening kind of idea, because I don't think that there is such thing as a good free to play single player game. And I think that, you know, kind of, I mean, maybe $60 is too much or whatever, right? But I think that, yeah, paying $15 up front to get the Banner Saga, and then not have to worry about how that business model interacts with the gameplay and interacts with the story is a great thing, as far as I'm concerned, because those things can be really disruptive to the wrong game. You know, like game-endingly disruptive. So yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit like you know, it's a little bit like this games as art, games as sport thing to a certain extent, where like certain games are going to be certain games are going to be free to play, certain games are going to be buy to play, certain games are going to be $60 flat, certain games are going to be $60 up front, and then a $50 season pass for like, you know, whatever kind of down the line. And I think that variety should be maintained almost as much as possible, because not every business plan is going to fit every game, and it gets really dangerous when we say that Assassin's Creed Egypt or whatever just got leaked, so to speak, is going to be, you know, like the first free to play Assassin's Creed, but you know, in order to use the bows and arrows, like you've gotta pay with in-game whatever that you can buy with crystals. You know, like that's a frightening future.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. I think you're right. You hit on something that, you know, it works for certain games, it doesn't for others. I am hesitant to say that there will never be a good free to play single player game. I think maybe it doesn't exist yet, but I don't think it's impossible. I don't think anything's
okay. Yeah,
impossible.
fair enough. You're right. Yeah, it's not impossible. I'm sure that somebody somewhere has figured out a good way to make that work, or will in the future.
Like I think like a very easy kind of idea for this is like, if the first episode of The Walking Dead was free and you had to pay for the rest of them, I think that's like a perfectly acceptable type of model, because it's just kind of like teasing you in with the first bite for free, and makes you pay.
Get you hooked on that beautiful story crack.
Something like that. Yeah.
that emotional cocaine.
Yeah. I mean, in essence, that's actually kind of that model, kind of like you get the first piece for free and then you pay for the back part of the game is kind of the same argument that people use for pirating. It's like, I used to try it, and then if I like it, I'll buy it.
Yeah, I've heard so many people say that, but they never actually do. That is almost always an excuse. Which is like, oh, like, yeah, I just want to try it out, and then they play the whole game pirated and never buy it. I don't think I've met one person ever who has actually done the interaction that you just described.
You do know one person, because I've done that before.
Oh, have you done that?
I don't pirate games anymore.
You're an outlier.
Yeah, I mean,
in my ridiculously anecdotal evidence.
Sure. No, I do not pirate games anymore because I am fortunate enough to make this sort of income where I don't need to actually worry about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel that.
I can even if I didn't, I could eat ramen for a week so I could play World of Warcraft or something.
I literally do that. Well, not World of Warcraft specifically, but I will do that with like when Dragon Age Inquisition came out or whatever. The week before, I was like, all right, buddy, you can't go out and get like a $15 salad for lunch every day this week. we're gonna cook up that ramen, man. 30 cents, we're good. Like, in order to fund my ridiculous gaming habits.
Sure, but I wouldn't, regardless of whether or not there are a lot of people or a few people who subscribe to that. But this wasn't meant to be a tangent on pirating, but that's my point. My point was that that kind of model I don't think would probably be called free to play, but is I think a good model for that for something that has an episodic format.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it would be a pretty great model.
Even though it's mostly just a free to play chapter tacked onto the front end of a buy to play experience.
Then people will start getting mad about it being DLC. The first chapter was free. Why do I have to play all these? Why do I have to pay for all these other chapters? So I can see it now.
I think the secret of all of this that everybody not everybody, because there are some things that are worse than others. But I think part of the secret is that somebody's going to be mad no matter which direction you choose, right? Like if to go back to the kind of to the Chaos Warriors for Total War, it's like if they hadn't released it for free and they just made it or if they hadn't released it for free with the pre-order and just made it day one DLC, it would have been like, well, why don't I get anything for pre-ordering it? Why can't I get some bonus? That would be a nice bonus. I bet you everybody would be very happy if they released it as a pre-order or as a pre-order bonus type of deal. That's just I think the dirty secret of all of this is that one, no one's ever happy, or you can't please everybody, and two, that despite popular claim, gamers are a very diverse group of people with a varying set of opinions.
My own part of this, I guess we also addressed this in the DLC episode, but I don't mind rehashing this territory because this is a bone I frequently pick. I hate this stigma, this kind of anti-pre-order stigma, because I do think pre-orders are pre-orders did not come from conniving companies who are trying to nickel and dime every aspect of you. They literally came from gamers, right? Because gamers wanted to make sure that the copies didn't sell out, and then the companies, shitty companies came in and started nickel and diming kind of and everything like that. So I really hate that kind of I don't know, anti-pre-order propaganda almost.
I think there's some. Well, I think that.
This is, by the way, the podcast that goes viral, and then all of the Redditors are going to flood it because they find out that I work for Square Enix, so I'm just being a shill. Yeah. I'm just shilling.
I think it's actually a perfect example of a poorly done pre-order system was the initial pre-order set for Deus Ex Mankind Divided.
Yeah, dude, I'm 100% with you. My company was the poster child for garbage pre-orders. Yeah. Though I will point out that I think it was less than a week that thing got taken down.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was a, props to Square Enix for listening to its fans. Although part of me, the tinfoil hat me wants to say they only took it down because they knew they had to delay it, and that was going to be its own shit show because one of the pre-order rewards was early access.
I can neither confirm nor deny the tinfoilness of that hat. because I don't work in that department.
Yeah,
but I will say, I will say that I think this also happens with movies or whatever. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of kind of cooks in the kitchen. A lot of hands in the fire who are just, they're trying to do the best thing that they can or whatever. And I don't think that, there's a certain maliciousness that comes with the idea of
with the accusations. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? That I think is unfair.
What's the expression? Never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity.
Right. And I think that, and even with that Deus Ex pre-order thing, I get it. I do think that, I understand. I can put myself in the mindset of sitting in that marketing meeting and being like, yeah, no, that's actually a really neat idea, right? It's a cool way to do pre-orders, and it's something that I could totally see somewhat. I could see someone kind of come around to that system, whether or not it was perfectly implemented and all that other kind of stuff, right? Notwithstanding, but I think I don't know.
Yeah.
And so, and I also feel like, it's important to kind of honor that feedback to a large extent. I also think it's important to rebuff that feedback in the context of, I think it's important for Creative Assembly to rebuff this feedback about the Chaos Warriors. I think gamers do not have a point and Creative Assembly should stick to their guns about it. But I don't think that, obviously, the opposite case is exactly what we're describing with Deus Ex. We're like, yep, we should probably break this down.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the part of the thing with Mirror is you mentioned that this is something born out of gamers wanting to make sure that they had a copy, which is something that is less true in the modern age because you can't run out of digital copies, so to speak.
Right. I meant that in the sense of there's kind of like a narrative almost that pre-orders were just created so that companies could sell you shitty games. It's the only reason pre-orders were it's the only reason anybody started pre-ordering. It's no, that's not true. Historically, that is false, right? The genesis of pre-orders is fans of a game who want to guarantee their overnight copy, or they want to guarantee their copy at GameStop or whatever in 2007, when Steam. I guess Steam had launched by that point, but Steam isn't as much of a thing or whatever, right? Pre-order that's the genesis of pre-orders. Whether or not it got changed into this nickel and diming thing by companies, sure, I'm with you, right? I think Activision and I think Ubisoft and I think EA, these guys have shitty pre-orders all the time that are and they're really running you and they can be bad, right? But the genesis, the start of pre-orders was not a negative place.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. That's a fair point.
How do you think free to play, pay to play, all that stuff? Do you think that has a place in tabletop, with Pathfinder and Paizo, or anything along those lines? Just because we nominally, we care about those games.
I can't imagine a way that you would do. I guess, I mean, 5th edition kind of did it. It released the rules.
Literally yesterday, 5th edition actually kind of has done this.
Oh yes, because I know even way before that they released the basic edition for free, which was the base rules and then Wizard, Rogue.
Oh yeah,
Fighter.
yeah. You're right. Yeah, I actually think that there's a lot to be said for that. I think that that's a really neat system. And it's kind of what Pathfinder is, except you have to buy the core rulebook or whatever. But I actually kind of like an idea of a super light Pathfinder, right? That has the, that just the wizard, the rogue, the cleric, the fighter. These are all things, and then you kind of pay up and you buy your own kind of individual classes from there. But I could totally see myself pay $3 to buy the Arcanist class.
Yeah, I just don't think that works. I think fundamentally the model is just it's weirdly different. How do I want to put my finger on this? It's at the end of the day, anything you're paying for is something you could have homebrewed yourself anyway. It's just, I don't know. Part of the thing with a video game is you're paying for someone to do professional coding work so that your computer displays fancy graphics at you. And I guess at some level you could program that yourself, I guess. But it's weird because tabletop games kind of exist in this realm where it's all kind of like it's just knowledge and like rules rather than being like anything really tangible.
Yeah, I definitely feel that in a certain sense. But, like, I do think that there is something to say about, we have a friend of ours, we did our Warlord episode a couple of episodes ago or whatever, and we have a Facebook chat where we would talk about it. And for, while I was working on it, like, really hardcore for, like, 6 weeks straight, I would ask people's opinions in this chat, and we have a friend of ours who really hated it. He thinks it was, he thinks it's a poorly designed class. He thinks it's kind of whatever. And he is a big rules, not like rules Nazi or whatever, but like, he's a big guy that likes his rules. And so to a certain extent, I was trying not to name names because I'm kind of talking about him negatively. I don't mean
talked about him before on the podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, fair enough.
He's the GM for Iron Gods.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's the GM for Iron Gods. Well, it's Nick. Everybody, fine. Heads up. Nick really didn't like that I was home brewing stuff. I think another benefit, like an unsung benefit, is kind of the. You're buying the Paizo brand isn't worthless, right? When you buy Occult Adventures, right? We all collectively agree that those Occult Adventures classes are, to a certain extent well designed or whatever because they have this Paizo seal of approval, right? It's not like Mark's crazy bad. See, I don't mind shit talking Mark. It's not like Mark's crazy weird fucking third party psionics bullshit that's garbage, because all psionics is garbage. which is totally an unsupported claim. I just read the psionics rules when I was in high school. I read the psionics rules and I thought they were terrible, and I've just held fast to that opinion ever since. But anyway, I just mean in the sense of, I think that's valuable, right? Getting that Paizo seal of approval is sure.
I think I've kind of figured out, like, while you've been talking about, but like what I kind of really meant by that is, like, other than like it's that in order for me to, buy if I'm going to buy like a new class in League of Legends or a new hero in League of Legends or a new class in a video game, I can kind of see how it works. I can get a description of how it works. I can see other players playing it. I can kind of, get a feel for what it does. With something like League, you can play it on a free-to-play week, something like that. Whereas with a tabletop game, you can't do any of that because the moment you describe how the class works, that's what you're buying, right? Like,
ooh, yeah, it is actually kind of true.
You can't properly evaluate whether or not you want a thing until you have the rules, and you can't.
I mean, hypothetically, just to play devil's advocate, you could have first level mechanics for this class, but then lock levels 2 through 20.
I guess. I just don't. I don't
really think that would be a great system.
I don't think it works. I don't think that system works well in the I get you're just trying to come up with a way to do it. But, like, it's not even like, it's not even like you can return it, right? Like, as soon as you get it, you have it, and you can't like purge it, right? Like, I guess you could like cross the fingers and be like, I didn't copy it down anywhere. Here's your PDF back.
I mean, not to get political, but this is the reason that student debt carries with you over bankruptcy, right? If I go bankrupt, I can sell my house, right? That or whatever. But I can't sell back my education to the to the school or something like that in order to that's just kind of an impossibility of it.
Yeah, I always thought that was also kind of like, well, if you could declare bankruptcy, you could just go through college and immediately declare bankruptcy before you were employed.
That's also true.
But
this is kind of one of the I am really not prepared to talk about Bernie Sanders 2015. No, I'm kidding.
Gary Johnson.
Man, I do actually kind of want to I feel there's so many little extra podcasts that I want to have. I want to have a podcast where I get to really hardcore talk about movies. I want to have a podcast where I talk about TV shows or whatever. But man, I do want to have a political podcast, but I really don't at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like these would make good bonus episodes for us to not release on a regular schedule if we can ever
maybe
keep to our
when
regular schedule.
maybe in the general election we'll have a politics bonus episode.
Oh boy.
We were gonna have that Star Wars episode, but it kind of
we kind of
we should have a Star Wars episode just like in the future, because like I actually really like Star Wars games, and I think Star Wars games are fucking fascinating. Just kind of because they're so ubiquitous. And like as a property, it's just been, to a certain extent, it's been run into the ground or whatever. But there's a lot to parse there. The one last thing I want to talk about, kind of getting back to pay to win, so to speak, 5th edition, literally yesterday, released this day. Have you seen this thing? This it's kind of like iTunes, but it's like player generated iTunes, where it's called the DM Guild. And it's like, it's a service you sign up for or whatever. But if I'm a 5th edition DM and I'm homebrewing bosses, and I'm homebrewing maps, and I'm homebrewing locations and NPCs or whatever, I can upload that to the DM Guild, and I can choose to charge people for it. So I can make I can make Tonrik Bauer the boss of whatever, $3 or 99 cents or 5 cents or kind of whatever. Do you have any? Have you looked into this at all?
I haven't really looked into this, but I actually very recently found something very similar, but that was more general. It wasn't specific to 3.5. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Well, this one's specific to 5e.
Right. But I mean, it's so essentially my immediate thought is that's not that special, because it's just digital publishing, which is not something that's super hard to do. I mean, it's neat that that Wizards is willing to support it in that way, but like I can go get weird homebrewed content for a price on like d20pfsrd.com and on the Paizo's website. And I think it's neat that Wizards wants to support it in that way, but it's also like there's no seal of quality there either type of deal.
So the thing that what I almost like about this is I'm a big fan of 4E. Man, we have to have a 4E episode one day. I'm a big fan of 4E, and Wizards for 4th edition had a service. I actually hope they still have it, because I do plan on returning to 4E a couple of times before I die. They had this service that was great. I loved it. What it was is it was like a subscription model. I paid $5 a month kind of thing, but paying the $5, I got access to you got access to two things. One, you got a set of tools to like make up your own power. Like the stat blocks of 4th edition were kind of very specific, and so instead of like handwriting stat blocks or whatever, and then having to and then switching between the Monster Manual version and this version or whatever, you can input. You can type all this stuff in and print it out, and it looks great. So even though you're using the Elven Archer from the Monster Manual, your Elven Spearman that you homebrewed, they look the same next to each other on paper, which is just kind of like it's like a little quality of life thing. But the real reason that this service was great was it gave you access to every magic item and every honestly every item ever, and every NPC. Like in the bestiary or whatever in the game that had ever been published in 4th edition, kind of like D20 PFSRD, but with like a better interface and cooler and stuff. And you could do things like copy, you could copy this template into your own template and then futz around with the numbers and then kind of export it as its own thing. And I really liked that system. I thought that system was great. And so I kind of feel like this is the 5th edition version of that almost.
Okay. Well, that's that's
yeah, that is a thing.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, obviously, I like PFSRD and everything, and I appreciate what PFSRD does, but it does kind of like the usability of it bugs me sometimes.
Yeah. So the thing about PFSRD, D20 PFSRD though, is that like it's still the best way to browse all that content. If the amount of times it's not perfect, right? Like you can't find everything on there. It's not always arranged in the tables the way it should be. But it's a hell of a lot better than like manually paging through all 73 spot books that I've got sitting on my bookcase.
I 100% agree with you there. I mean, honestly, I kind of feel like that's one of the lacking things in D20 PFSRD. is something I've always wanted to do is filter out core Paizo stuff from Splatbook Paizo stuff, because the Splatbooks are like, they vary wildly in terms of quality, and so I think we can all agree that like the core hardcover Pathfinder game systems are good, and I kind of wish that I could like toggle and like pick and choose what item, like what I include and what I don't include. I kind of don't like the interaction where I also think this is useful just kind of from a pruning standpoint, but like I don't like the interaction where if I'm playing a wizard, if I'm playing an arcanist or whatever, if I'm playing by the core rules, I have so many spells, but if we're using D20 PFSRD, it's going to have 1,000, however many extra spells. That's I don't know. It's something I think about a little bit.
Yeah, no, I guess that's fair. I don't know. Sorry, that was not very helpful.
Fair enough. I guess we've kind of done this one. To death. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else? Did we appropriately cover pay to win, or?
I think they're maybe. That's always going to be the answer, right? Did we do all the things that we wanted to do? I think we got it off a tangent, but that's fine.
I kind of like tangents. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah,
the tangents don't bug me. I like that we have an ecosystem of stuff, kind of like, nothing is really in a vacuum, so to speak. Yeah, and now that we're talking about like the mechanics of our podcast, everyone, listeners, get a little insight into our meta podcasting.
Woo! No, that's we've broken the fourth wall.
That's true.
But yeah, anything else in games you wanted to talk about for the last?
There is. I want to talk about so many stuff in games. It has been so hard, by the way, not to go really off on Mass Effect 2, because I've played it for like 3 weeks, so like it's 3 podcasts where I have to just shut up, because I know one day we're gonna get to like a hardcore Mass Effect 2 podcast. I'm gonna like go nuts. It's gonna be my life is it's gonna be the best day of my life. My life is gonna peak when I get to make that podcast.
Well then, oof, buddy, what would you do if Andromeda was free to play?
Man, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how free to play it would be, I suppose.
It's a planet exploration game, right? Like,
yeah, I guess you could like
unlock
hide
more
planets behind paywalls. Man, I am excited for that game. I'm a little nervous about that game because I am afraid almost. I think BioWare games are their best when they are, kind of like the best way to play a BioWare game is to just play like the voice acted single player storyline stuff, right? Like a lot of these BioWare games are kind of like filled with superfluous crap that is just not like worth it. Some things are obviously side quests or whatever, and I think some of these side quests are good, but like, in Mass Effect 1, going around and exploring these planets and, like all of that kind of stuff is just like, it's such a chore. And I don't know, one day I feel like I'm going to get like that, like hard, straightforward single player experience that doesn't have any like fluffy bullshit on the side, and it's going to be beautiful. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't think I have anything else left to talk about. I'm excited for fishing in Black Desert because I'm always excited for fishing.
You are always excited for fishing. I actually really enjoy fishing in WoW. I was doing some fishing the other day, and I was just like, man, this is great. Yeah, I guess so. Iron Gods is wrapping up in the future, just like housekeeping stuff.
Yeah,
we're coming into our final stretch. It's like 3 or 4 more boss fights. So if you want to tune into the ultimate and penultimate episodes, I imagine that we'll probably go 3 episodes, probably deep. But maybe we'll only do 2. Who knows? And we're just getting into book 3, or I guess we've actually been at book 3 for a while, but we're just transitioning zones.
This is the start of book 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I guess Mark's has homebrewed this to such an extent that maybe his book 3 started earlier. Maybe his book 2 is just like ridiculously bloated, and we don't know.
But this is exactly the point in the written adventure path. Like when you solve the mystery in Magnamar and move to Turtleback Ferry is the split point between book 2 and book 3.
Can I just ask real quick what the difference is? But do you know what like the differences between Mark's version of solving the mystery and our version of solving the what does it look like in the vanilla Rune Lords? So
what do you mean in particular? Like, it's one of those weird things where like, so there's obviously no tournament in vanilla Rune Lords. Maybe that's not obvious, but there's no tournament in vanilla Rune Lords, and you go to the sawmill, and in the sawmill you fight somebody at the top of the tower. And at the very top of the tower, there's like a carrier raven's nest, and one of them flies over to the clock tower, and that's your big hint as to where like the stuff is coming from.
Gotcha.
And there's just a bunch of murders happening around the city, and you have to figure out like what's up.
So is it just like those 2 dungeons, so to speak?
There's more. What is there? There's
because another thing that we did is we did the it's actually an adventure path module, I want to say. It's like the thing with Zedendi, I know because Mark and I have both. I used it in my Kingmaker game and he used it in this, where Zedendi is a module that he baked in.
Which one was it?
It's the one where we went into the basement and there was like the mind controlled, the mind controlled succubus or something like that. God, it's so long ago I don't even really remember.
Maybe I might have been absent for that session because I don't remember this at all.
Yeah, I mean there was like an elf, like priestess thing or whatever. And she was like dominated. I think she was like dominated by this succubus or dominated by this whatever. And it's also tough because I can never remember like the names of like Mark's gods because they're different.
Yeah, I have no recollection of this. This must have happened while I was elsewhere.
Fair enough. That may have been the case.
Yeah, but so Magnamar is mostly you go to Aldern Foxglove's old house. You figure out some stuff there. You find the deed to the Foxglove Manor. That it's like a covenant with the brother the
Skinsaw cult.
Yeah, essentially, it's got a different name, but it's the Skinsaw Salt and the cult, and there's the sawmills referenced in it. You go to the sawmill. You find out a bunch of different things, and then eventually it leads you to the tower. I feel like I'm missing a piece in between, but that's pretty much it. It's like, I think book two also includes the Foxglove Manor. That's what I'm mixing.
Gotcha.
And that whole deal. Yeah, Mark's book 2 lasted a long time. Come to think of it. Did we do the Insane Asylum?
Oh yeah, we did do the Insane Asylum.
Yeah, that's
Jesus.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, it's Foxglove Manor into the Insane Asylum, and then Magnamar is book 2 in Vanilla.
Okay.
He hits a lot of the same major beats, but he adds a lot of his own content in it.
I think Mark and I do a similar thing, which is recontextualizing kind of the same encounters. The sawmill and the clock tower, and the Insane Asylum were, they were just they were the same kind of mechanics. Well, I mean, he changes the mechanics more than I do, but they're like the same kind of mechanics, the same like the same skeleton of mechanics, but reskinned with different kind of story because we get there in a different way, and the people who are there are different kind of thing.
Sure. The sawmill was pretty much the same. The The clock tower was very, very different. But the sawmill was pretty much spot on as to what it was supposed to be.
Gotcha.
In my game, things ended like we got there differently, essentially. But it's you know, you can see the similarities, you can see the differences. It's Mark does some really cool stuff with it. And obviously that's a lot of work that for my games I don't have the time to do as much, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately.
Do you want to do that work? Just wondering.
So specifically for Rune Lords, for the listeners at home, I'm running that game as vanilla as possible. In fact, I only stopped recently because my players were running train on it way too hard. But there was a lot of their first games, and I wanted it to be as faithful to Raw as possible. Just because I figured that's in my mind that's a good way to kind of get people into the right place for that, and also especially for the early adventures. It's when you start with new players, you never know how they're going to be, and if that's going to like hit into this kind of like the GM killed me type of like
gotcha
stuff.
Yeah.
And so I figured for the first adventure, by sticking very hard to the rules, if any of that ever happened, I could be like, well, that's the rules, as opposed to having to justify my encounter design, as it were. Now I'm much more comfortable with the players. They're all good. They're all even the worst of them is not that type of player. And so I'm comfortable doing a little bit more modification. I'm still running Rune Lords as raw as possible, just to kind of like save my own sanity, because I've been trying to do a lot more with Wrath of the Righteous. And frankly, that campaign interests me a lot more than Rune Lords. Just because this is my third run through Rune. This is my second time through Mark's Rune Lords, and my first time DMing it. And it's pretty standard, and
it's one of those things. I definitely feel that when it comes to I've talked about this a little bit before, but I feel that when it comes to Hell's Rebels, I think it really bugs me. I was complaining about this to you the other day, but it really bugs me how disposable a lot of these characters are. Like, Hell's Rebels is full of one-off characters who are important for one book and then completely disappear. But in the next book, a character who fills a very similar function is introduced, and I'm just like, why are these not the same character? Why do you have me having to like introduce an entirely new an entirely new puckish female roguish bartender who helps out the party, right? Like, why can't they just be the same? And so I've done a lot of modification. I've done a lot of. I also think the first two books of Hell's Rebels are pretty not great, because they're so. They're so. They just have you go on these like ridiculously tangential missions that are there, and the missions themselves are interesting. The mechanics of it are fine, but like the reason you're going on these missions is literally like these things are vaguely rebellious things or whatever, and so a big part of my restructuring of Hell's Rebels has been like putting all of this stuff and putting it in a big story vice, where the overall skeleton of the first book isn't, hey, just go on 7 random ass missions just for fun until we can haphazardly unlock the final dungeon or whatever. It's like no. We're gonna structure this properly. I swear to Christ.
Yeah.
But books 3 and 4 are good. Book 5 I've just started reading, which looks okay, but I haven't actually read it all that much, to be honest. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I want to do so much. I want to talk about Hell's Rebels so much on this podcast, because there's so much stuff that I want to explain almost in a thought process kind of sense.
Sure.
I obviously can't do that because of spoilers.
Yeah. I think part of this is also kind of like we've talked about this before off cast, is system fatigue. We've been playing Pathfinder for a long time.
Yeah, that's totally
and
true.
before that we were playing 3.5. And I think that Like I'm excited at least to play some Shadowrun next to GM.
Oh yeah, that's right. I don't think we've announced. Have we announced this to the viewers?
Oh, we haven't.
Viewers, we're playing Shadowrun with Nick after Iron Gods concludes.
Yeah, I think we've very recently discussed going on a 2 games per week rotating gondola that way.
Yeah, but part of me doesn't like that. I really want to play Hell's Rebels like really weekly because I think consistency is important, and especially for like these hardcore story games. If you have too much downtime, it can really kind of like people forget stuff and like details are important, that kind of thing. But I actually think that 2 weeks on, 1 week off kind of thing is a pretty good way to kind of like bounce around it without fatiguing people out. Or
I'm definitely in favor of that because I can't do 3 days a week plus the game I try and run on my own, which never meets. Unfortunately, I'm not the scheduling games is possibly its own podcast.
Possibly, it's really. I don't know that we could make it. You think we could make an hour and a half out of that?
No, I don't think we can do scheduling games.
I feel like we've actually said a lot of things that like we couldn't make it. I want to have like a junk drawer episode, where we just kind of like pull out a bunch of these like 15-minute half topips and just kind of knock them out of the board. Anyway, we're just pay to win, right, guys?
Yeah, right.
Viewers, listeners, we will be playing Iron Gods and Ruin Lords for the next couple of weeks, but then transitioning to Hell's Rebels and Shadowrun, which is going to be Nick's new game. We're all very excited to play Shadowrun. Obviously, Shadowrun is kind of like pick up and go.
It's also different. It's also
oh my god, these mechanics are giving me such cancer now that I'm actually reading them. That should be a podcast. Anyway, I guess we will listen to us later.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Farewell.
Bye, guys.